The old county auction house, just outside the small town of Missoula, Montana, smelled of sawdust, sweat, and old despair. Under the flickering fluorescent lights, a German shepherd lay motionless on the cold concrete floor. His once proud frame was reduced to skin stretched over scarred muscle, ribs visible through his matted coat. His eyes were half closed, dulled, and lifeless, as if all the light had drained out long ago. $50 to start, the auctioneer called, his voice sharp but tired. The crowd shuffled in their seats, murmuring, snickering. Not worth a dime, someone muttered. Damaged goods, another chuckled. Laughter rippled through the audience, bouncing off the old timber beams. In the back row, a figure shifted. A chair scraped against the floor. Liam Carter rose, his silhouette caught in the glow of a dying overhead light. He wore a battered Marine Corps jacket, jeans streaked with mud, and worn boots. His short, dark blonde hair was unkempt, and his steel blue eyes were hard beneath a shadowed brow. The moment he spoke, the room fell into a hush. "I'll take him." The auctioneer froze. The crowd turned. Liam's voice had the sound of steel pulled across stone, steady but haunted. For a beat, no one moved. "Ah, sold," the auctioneer said, almost in relief. No one knew it then, but this moment would set off a chain of events that would shake the lives of everyone in that room. Liam hadn't planned on coming here. That morning, like every morning since his return from Afghanistan 3 years ago, he'd gone through the motions. Coffee at dawn, tending to the few horses left on his late grandfather's ranch, walking the weathered fence lines, feeding the old border collie, who refused to leave his side. But the local paper had caught his eye over breakfast. Final auction, before euthanasia, former military dog, aggressive, no rehabilitation possible. 6 short lines that rattled his chest like a gunshot. He'd seen enough of war, enough of what it did to men, to dogs, to anyone asked to give more than they had to give. The auction was over in minutes. No background check, no questions, just $200 and a signature on a waiver he didn't even read. The auctioneer handed him a worn leather leash and mumbled, "I'd recommend a muzzle. He's unpredictable." Liam crouched about 6 feet from the dog. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, voice low, measured. "I'm Liam. I'm not here to hurt you." The German shepherd flicked one ear, eyes shifting, the faintest trace of tension coiled under his scarred skin. Liam stayed perfectly still. He knew better than to push. Head-on approaches were a mistake. Sudden moves. Death wish. Fear. It stank. From the side, a soft voice joined him. "His name's Ranger." "Well, they've been calling him Zero, because that's what they say he's worth." Liam turned slightly. Dr. Sophie Bennett, the local veterinarian, watched from the shadows of the auction house, arms crossed over her grey fleece jacket. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, freckles spattered over pale skin. She looked exhausted, but determined. 3 weeks he's been here, Sophie added softly. Won't let anyone near. Barely eats. Liam nodded, eyes locked on the dog. That's not your name anymore, pal. The moment that followed would live in Sophie's memory forever. With a flash of motion, the German shepherd lunged. A blur of teeth, muscle, fury aimed straight for Liam's throat, but Liam didn't flinch. The two locked eyes. Time slowed, and then something broke. Not Liam's neck, but Ranger's rage. The dog froze inches from Liam's skin, hot breath steaming between them. Confusion flickered in Ranger's eyes, edged out the rage, trembling at the border of something long buried. Slowly, shaking, Ranger backed down. Jesus, someone breathed. That thing should be put down. No, Liam said quietly, rising to his feet. He's coming home with me. Getting Ranger into the truck was another battle. The German shepherd wouldn't budge, planted like stone. Liam didn't yank the leash, didn't drag. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, voice low and steady. He talked about the ranch, the horses, the quiet mornings and the cold stars. An hour passed, then 2. "We're closing up, Mr. Carter," the auctioneer called. "We'll leave when he's ready," Liam said without looking up. As the sun dipped below the horizon, pouring gold through the cracked windows, Ranger took one hesitant step forward, then another. By the time they reached the truck, he was walking beside Liam, not trustingly but willingly. From the auction house steps, Sophie watched them drive away. "Good luck," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant it for Liam or the dog. Neither she nor Liam knew this was just the beginning of a healing neither man nor beast had ever expected, of a reckoning that would ripple far beyond one scarred ranch in Montana. That night, under a sky cracked with stars, Liam sat on the old wooden porch, a mug of cold coffee in his hands. Ranger circled the yard, pacing the fence line, unwilling to come near, unwilling to sleep, unwilling to eat. "All right, Ranger," Liam murmured into the dark. "We'll do it your way. No pressure, no commands. Just two battered soldiers under the same stars, separated by species, united by something deeper." Liam stayed on the steps all night. Neither of them slept. The night air bit cold against Liam's skin as he sat on the porch steps, his elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped. The old ranch behind him creaked in the wind, a tired structure that had weathered generations of Carters, now reduced to just him, the last of the line. Across the dirt yard, Ranger stood stiff as a statue, legs braced, tail low, head slightly turned to keep Liam in sight. His ribs shuddered each time he breathed, flanks twitching at every distant sound, the groan of the wind through the cottonwoods, the far-off creak of a weather vane, the muted bark of coyotes. The bowl of kibble Liam had left out sat untouched. So did the water. Liam let out a slow breath, watching it curl in the moonlight. "Your move, buddy," he murmured, barely loud enough for himself. It would be a long night. By dawn, the world had softened into a misty grey. Liam rose, with a grunt, his joints stiff. Ranger had not moved an inch from his self-appointed post near the fence line. His eyes were open, bloodshot, haunted. His legs trembled with exhaustion. But still, he stood. The veterinarian's truck rumbled down the gravel road, kicking up a trail of dust as it came to a halt near the gate. Dr. Sophie Bennett stepped out, pushing a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear, her pale skin pink with cold. She approached cautiously, holding a thermos of coffee. "Rough night, you could say that." Liam offered a dry half-smile. Sophie's gaze flicked toward the dog, her brow tightening. He didn't touch the food. "Nope," she sighed, shoulders sinking slightly. "He's in deep, Liam. Deeper than most I've seen." Liam's jaw flexed. So was I. Sophie knelt about 20 feet from Ranger, speaking in soft, measured tones. She reached for her veterinary bag, but at the mere sight of it, Ranger's body changed. His hackles lifted, lips curling, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. Sophie froze, hands open. Okay, not today." Liam watched, eyes narrowed, noting every flicker in the dog's body language. "That's not fear, aggression." Sophie rose slowly, brushing dirt from her jeans. "No, that's trauma." For the rest of the morning, Liam kept to a quiet rhythm. He mucked out the small barn, patched a loose board in the corral, checked the frost lines on the water pipes. Ranger followed, at a distance, his dark eyes never leaving Liam. By noon, Liam deliberately left a trail of small gestures. A tossed-out rawhide bone near the porch, a water bowl shifted closer to the house, soft murmurings as he passed. He never forced, never called, never chased. That afternoon, a storm built in the distance. The sky thickened, the clouds bruised and heavy. Liam knew the signs. Montana weather could turn on a dime. As the first low rumble of thunder rolled across the mountains, Ranger flinched hard, his body snapping into a crouch, his breathing quickened, eyes darting wildly. Another rumble, closer this time, and the shepherd bolted, a streak of muscle and fear tearing across the field toward the tree line. Ranger, Liam, was already running. Mud sucked at his boots as Liam pushed through the pasture, heart hammering. Lighting forked overhead, splitting the sky with blinding light. Rain sheeted down, turning dirt to muck. In the flashes, Liam caught glimpses of the dog weaving between fence posts, crashing through underbrush, panic rising. He followed, not yelling, not cursing, just running. He found Ranger tangled in a drainage ditch, legs splayed, chest heaving, eyes wide and white in the dark. Liam stopped 5 yards away, dropping to his knees in the mud. He said nothing. Just sat, rain sliding down his face, chest heaving, watching the terrified animal shudder in the shadows. After long minutes, Liam began to speak, a thread of words in the storm. I know what it's like when the thunder sounds like mortars, when the dark doesn't feel safe. Ranger's ears flicked toward the sound. When you can't trust a damn soul, 'cause trust got your brothers killed. The dog's body softened, just a fraction. Liam's voice cracked, raw and low. I know, pal. I know. They stayed like that as the storm raged above. Man and dog, both soaked to the bone, bound by wounds no one else could see. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the world smelling of wet grass and clean earth. Liam and Ranger walked back to the ranch, not side by side, but not apart either. A beginning, not trust, not yet, but a beginning. Back at the ranch, Sophie's truck waited. She stepped out, eyes wide as she took in the mud-caked, exhausted pair. How was your night? She asked, a note of wry humor slipping into her voice. Eventful, Liam rasped, brushing wet hair out of his eyes. Sophie's smile softened. You're both still standing. That's something. Later that morning, Liam filled the food bowl again. This time, Ranger approached slow, wary, stopping 6 feet away. Liam waited. Ranger inched closer, paused, sniffed, took the first tentative mouthful. Liam's chest tightened. He let out a shaky breath he hadn't known he was holding. That's it, buddy, he murmured. That's it. As night fell once again, Liam sat on the porch, watching the silhouette of the dog shift and prowl in the dark. I'll be right here, Liam said softly, barely above a whisper. Every damn night if I have to. And he meant it. The Montana morning broke soft and cold, mist curling over the pasture like ghostly fingers. Liam Carter stood at the kitchen sink, steam rising from his coffee mug as his gaze drifted out the window. Beyond the frosted glass, Ranger prowled the fence line, nose to the ground, tail twitching, restless, vigilant. It had been 3 days since the storm. Ranger was eating now, though only when Liam wasn't looking. He drank too, but only from the far side of the yard. Every approach Liam made was carefully watched, every movement measured against some silent ledger of trust or threat. Liam didn't push. He simply moved through his days, repairing fences, tending to the horses, mucking out the barn. And always, Ranger was there, a shadow at the edge of sight, tracking his every step. By mid-morning, Sophie Bennett's truck rumbled down the gravel road. She parked under the cottonwoods, stepping out with her familiar quick, light stride. Auburn hair tied in a ponytail, grey fleece jacket zipped against the chill, pale skin, flushed with the cold. You look like you've slept 5 minutes in 3 days, Sophie remarked, hands on her hips. 6, actually, Liam deadpanned, wiping his hands on a rag. Sophie glanced toward the yard. He's still keeping his distance? Yeah, Liam murmured, but he's watching, and that's something. Sophie unpacked her medical bag near the porch. The moment the zipper rasped, Ranger froze mid-step, head snapping toward her, body stiff as a drawn bow. Sophie paused. Easy, big guy. But Ranger's lip curled. A low, rattling growl rose from deep in his chest. Liam stepped forward, voice quiet but firm. Not today, Doc. Sophie slowly set the bag down, backing away. Not fear, aggression, she murmured, eyes sharp with observation. That's trauma. Medical equipment is a trigger. Liam's jaw tightened. Makes sense. Sophie gave him a long look. There's more to this dog's past than they put on paper. That evening, as the sky burned orange over the mountains, Liam sat on the porch with a battered notebook in his lap. His fingers traced the rough handwriting of an old journal. His grandfather's notes about the ranch, the cattle, the bitter winters. Ranger circled near the barn, pacing. You're not the only one with scars, buddy, Liam muttered under his breath. His hand drifted to the thin white line along his own jaw, the one from a Humvee rollover outside Kandahar. The dream still came, blood and smoke, and the sharp crack of bone. His gaze shifted to Ranger, a warrior, a survivor, and still fighting his own invisible war. Late that night, Liam was jolted awake by the sound of frantic scratching. He bolted from bed, heart thudding, breath sharp. Ranger. He stumbled to the back door, throwing it open. In the moonlight, Ranger thrashed near the fence, back legs kicking, caught in the grip of a nightmare. Soft whimpers broke from his throat, eyes squeezed shut, chest heaving. Liam dropped to his knees in the cold dirt, heart clenching. It's okay, boy, he whispered, voice low and steady. You're safe. Ranger didn't wake. Not at first, but slowly, gradually, the trembling eased. His body slumped, chest still heaving, paws twitching. Liam stayed there in the dirt, keeping watch. Morning brought a knock on the door. Liam cracked it open to find Sophie holding a manila envelope, her face pale, eyes tense. The military released some of his records, she said softly. They sat at the kitchen table as Sophie spread out papers, stamped with official seals. His name's not Zero, Sophie murmured. It's Ranger. 3 combat tours with special operations, highly decorated. Liam's hands trembled slightly as he ran his fingers over the faded photographs. A younger, stronger Ranger, sleek coat shining, alert and proud beside a uniformed handler. But then, Sophie continued, her voice dipping, there's a 6-month gap, completely redacted. After that, he was labeled unfit, aggressive, untrainable, sent stateside. Auctioned off. Liam's stomach twisted. Somebody did this to him. Sophie's eyes flicked up to meet his, yeah. And we're going to find out who. That afternoon, Liam sat on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, papers spread across the boards. Ranger stood 10 feet away, head low, eyes watchful. Liam's voice was quiet. You remember it, don't you? Afghanistan. The dog's ears flicked, his gaze sharpening. Liam smiled faintly. A tired, aching thing. I was there too. He let the words settle, drift into the crisp air. For the first time, Ranger crossed the distance on his own. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to choose. As night fell, Liam left the porch light on. Ranger circled twice at the edge of the yard. Then, after a long pause, settled on the top step, back to the door, facing the dark. Liam leaned back in his chair, arms folded. Yeah, he murmured into the night. You're a good soldier. Above them, the stars stretched quiet and endless. The next morning, Liam Carter awoke to the sound of claws scraping softly on the porch planks. Blinking against the pale dawn light, he reached for his mug, only to remember he hadn't brewed coffee yet. Through the window he saw Ranger pacing in slow, measured circles, nose to the boards, tail low, eyes flicking now and then toward the door. Liam pulled on his jacket, running a hand through his short, dark blonde hair, feeling the grit of poor sleep behind his steel blue eyes. When he stepped onto the porch, Ranger stopped mid-stride, ears forward, body tensed. Morning, soldier, Liam murmured. Ranger gave a soft huff and resumed pacing, but Liam caught it. The dog was 3 feet closer than the day before. Progress. By mid-morning, Sophie Bennett arrived, her auburn ponytail damp with drizzle. Grey fleece zipped to her throat. She carried the manila envelope again, eyes set in a tight line. I made some calls, she said, pushing papers across Liam's kitchen table. There's a name attached to that 6-month gap. Liam's jaw tensed. Who? Colonel Victor Hale, Sophie said quietly. Special Ops Commander, court-martialed. But the records are a mess. And here's the kicker. You were stationed under his command. The room went still. Liam's mind flashed back to Kandahar, to a mission gone sideways, to the hollowed faces of his team when they returned without half their number. He hadn't known the name behind the orders. Now he did. Outside, Ranger prowled the fence line, his movements sharp, agitated. Liam watched through the window, chest tightening. He knows, Liam murmured. On some level, he knows. Sophie touched his arm lightly. He doesn't just need safety, Liam. He needs justice. The next few days passed in a blur of rain and wind. Liam threw himself into work, repairing the crumbling barn door, restacking the woodpile, mending sagging fences. Ranger was never far, his black and tan coat a shadow at the edge of Liam's vision. They developed a rhythm. Liam left food closer each day. Ranger circled nearer at night. On the 5th day, Liam woke to find Ranger curled in a tight ball on the porch, a faint tremor running through his flanks. Without a word, Liam settled on the top step, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders, and kept watch through the night. That morning, Liam and Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor of the ranch house, sifting through Ranger's fragmented military file. There's a pattern here, Sophie said, eyes scanning the paperwork. Dogs trained under Hale show the same signs. Aggression, trauma responses, shutdown behavior, and every one of them was shipped home, labeled unfit. Liam exhaled slowly. They broke him. Sophie's gaze softened. But you're putting the pieces back together. A soft noise made them look up. Ranger stood in the doorway, head tilted, one paw lifted slightly off the floor. His eyes flicked from Liam to Sophie, tense but curious. Liam smiled faintly. We're talking about you, partner. Ranger huffed and astonishingly crossed the threshold, just 3 steps in, but enough to make Sophie's eyes widen. Liam, she whispered, he's choosing you. That afternoon, Liam took a risk. He walked into the yard, no leash, no commands, just a rawhide bone in his hand. He knelt in the damp grass and placed it carefully at his feet, then sat back, hands open, heart steady. Ranger approached slowly, head low, body trembling faintly. Easy, Liam murmured. The dog's nose twitched. 1 step, 2. With a tentative motion, Ranger extended his neck and took the bone, retreating to the edge of the yard to chew. Liam let out a shaky breath, a knot in his chest loosening. That evening, the air smelled of pine and damp earth. Liam leaned against the porch rail, watching Ranger patrol the fence line under the rising moon. His phone buzzed on the railing, startling him from his thoughts. The voice on the line was gravelly, familiar. Carter, it's Jack Morales. Liam straightened, gripping the phone. Jack had been his sergeant overseas, and one of the few men he trusted. I hear you've got one of Haley's dogs, Jack said. Listen, Liam. Haley's still got friends in high places. Be careful. And thank you for bringing one of our own home. As the call ended, Liam felt the weight of it settle deep in his chest. This was bigger than him. Bigger than a dog. This was about redemption and reckoning, and making sure men like Hale were never trusted with another life. That night, Liam left the porch door cracked open, just a few inches. An invitation. And when he woke at dawn, stiff and cold on the old sofa, there was a shape curled at the foot of the porch steps. A battered, scarred German shepherd, breathing slow and deep in the fragile light of morning. The following days passed in a blur of cold mornings and long, silent nights. Ranger now spent his days near the porch, stretched on the old wooden boards, his scarred body slowly filling out as the meals Liam left were consumed without hesitation. At night, Liam often found him curled at the foot of the steps, his breathing soft in the quiet Montana dark. It was progress, fragile, delicate progress. But Liam Carter knew better than to relax. because with every layer they peeled back from Ranger's past, the storm they were heading toward only grew darker. Sophie Bennett arrived one afternoon with a fire in her step, her auburn ponytail bouncing as she crossed the muddy yard. Liam met her at the porch, rolling up his sleeves, a streak of dirt on his jaw. "I pulled the rest of the military reports," Sophie said without preamble, holding up a thick file. "Liam, this goes deeper than we thought." They sat at the kitchen table, Ranger curled beneath the window, his watchful eyes flicking between them. "Colonel Victor Hale didn't just run enhanced training," Sophie murmured. "He ran a black site program, off-record operations. Dogs and handlers sent into missions, even special forces wouldn't touch." Liam's fists tightened on the table. "And it gets worse," Sophie added, voice dropping. "There's a report here. Ranger was deployed on a mission you were on." Liam's blood ran cold. He reached for the file, heart thudding, as he flipped through the grainy photos. Bombed-out villages, twisted metal, the haunted eyes of soldiers. And there, in the corner of one frame, the unmistakable silhouette of Ranger, younger, stronger, head high beside a handler. Liam dimly remembered Corporal Ryan Munro. Munro hadn't made it home. Neither had half the squad. Liam pushed back from the table, dragging a hand through his short, dark blonde hair. His steel blue eyes were tight, jaw clenched. "All this time," he murmured, voice hoarse, "I didn't know he was there." Sophie's voice was soft. "Maybe it's why you were meant to find each other." Outside, Ranger stirred, ears flicking toward the sound of Liam's voice. His amber eyes met Liam's across the room, holding steady, as if some piece of old memory sparked in the dark. That evening, Liam sat on the porch steps, Ranger stretched at his feet, the horizon burning gold over the Montana hills. His phone buzzed. It was Jack Morales again. "Carter, listen carefully." Jack's voice crackled through the line. "Haley's people know you have that dog. Word is, they're sending someone to retrieve him." Liam's hand tightened on the phone. "Let them come." Jack sighed. "Be smart, Liam. You're poking a hornet's nest." Liam's gaze drifted to Ranger, who lifted his head slightly, as if sensing the shift in the air. Liam's voice was steady as steel. "I'm done running." The next morning, the first threat arrived. A black SUV rolled up the long drive, tires crunching on gravel. Two men stepped out, plain clothes, military posture, cold eyes. Liam met them at the gate, arms folded, boots planted in the dirt. "Mr. Carter," the taller man said smoothly, "we're here for the dog." Liam didn't blink. "Not happening." The shorter man's mouth curved in a thin smile. "It's military property." "He's not property," Liam shot back, voice sharp. "Not anymore." Behind him, Ranger emerged from the porch shadows, shoulders squared, head high. The men stiffened at the sight of him, at the raw, quiet power coiled under scarred skin. "We'll be back," the tall man murmured, turning toward the SUV. Liam's jaw clenched. "I'll be waiting." That night, Sophie joined Liam on the porch, a thermos of coffee in her hands. "You know they won't give up," she said softly, eyes on the moonlit fields. "I know," Liam murmured, "but neither will we." Ranger lay beside them, body pressed close to Liam's boots, amber eyes reflecting the silver light. For the first time, Liam reached down, slow, deliberate, and let his fingers brush the thick fur between Ranger's ears. The dog stiffened. Then, after a heartbeat, leaned ever so slightly into the touch. Inside the house, the old landline rang. Liam rose to answer, his gut tight. It was Emily Harper, the widow of Corporal Munro. Her voice was soft, trembling. "Mr. Carter, I heard you have Ranger." Liam's chest tightened. "I do." There was a long pause. "He's all I have left of Ryan," Emily whispered. "Please, keep him safe." Liam's throat worked as he swallowed the knot there. "I promise," he said quietly. "I will." As dawn broke, Liam stood at the edge of the field, Ranger at his side. The cold air sliced through his jacket, the horizon bleeding pink and gold. For the first time, Ranger leaned against his leg, a weight both heavy and grounding. Liam set his hand on the dog's scarred shoulder, eyes locked on the rising sun. "Let them come," he murmured, and beside him Ranger stood tall, no longer just a shadow of war, but something stronger, a survivor, a soldier reborn. The morning broke sharp and cold, the Montana air thick with frost. Liam Carter loaded hay into the barn, his breath fogging in the chill, while Ranger moved in slow, wary loops along the fence line. It had been a tense few days since the black SUV came and went. Liam had slept lightly, shotgun leaned against the doorframe, ears tuned to every creak of the old ranch house. But the threat had brought something unexpected, the town's attention. First came Emily Harper. She pulled up in a dusty sedan, a small woman with tired eyes and a tight, determined mouth. "I want to see him," she said simply. Liam hesitated at the porch, hand on the rail. "He's still coming around." But as if drawn by a thread, Ranger emerged from the side of the house, his amber eyes fixed on the stranger. Emily's breath hitched. She stepped carefully into the yard, crouching slightly, her gloved hands open. "Why, sweet boy," she whispered. "You were with Ryan, weren't you?" To Liam's astonishment, Ranger moved closer, not all the way, but closer than he had with anyone else. Emily's voice cracked. "Thank you for bringing him home." Word spread faster than Liam expected. By afternoon, Jack Morales arrived, pulling his battered truck up the drive, boots thudding on the frozen ground. The grizzled ex-sergeant gave Liam a long look, clapped his shoulder, then turned toward the dog. "Well, I'll be damned," Jack murmured. "That's Ranger. Thought we'd lost him with Monroe." Ranger stiffened as Jack approached, but there was no growl, no flash of teeth, just a tilt of the head, a searching flicker in the dog's eyes. "Still a good soldier," Jack said softly, kneeling to meet Ranger's gaze. "Still one of us." By sundown, there were half a dozen trucks parked outside the Carter Ranch. Veterans, neighbors, friends. The porch lights cast a warm glow over the gathering as Sophie handed out mugs of coffee, her auburn ponytail slipping loose from under a knit cap. Liam leaned against the porch rail, arms folded, heart tight. He had always been a loner, always kept his pain locked behind steel blue eyes and calloused hands. But now, standing here, he felt something shift. Not just in him, but in the town. Jack raised his coffee mug, voice carrying in the cold. "Folks, let's be clear. They're not just coming for a dog. They're coming for a symbol. And I'll be damned if we let them walk in here without a fight." A murmur of agreement swept the group. Sophie stepped forward, eyes on Liam. "We need to document everything. Photos, videos. We get Ranger's story out there before they can cover it up." Emily added quietly. "Ryan's parents would want to help." Liam felt his throat tighten. For the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders didn't feel like something he had to carry alone. That night, as the last truck rumbled down the road, Liam sat on the porch steps, Ranger stretched beside him. Above them, the stars blazed cold and clear. Liam reached down, fingers brushing Ranger's thick, rough fur. "Guess we've got ourselves an army, huh?" he murmured. The dog huffed softly, resting his chin on Liam's boot. The next morning brought something Liam hadn't expected. Mail. Stacks of it. Handwritten letters. Packages. Donations from strangers who had heard the story. Families of veterans, old handlers, even schoolchildren who had learnt about military dogs in class. Sophie arrived with her arms full of envelopes, laughing breathlessly. "You're going viral, soldier." Liam groaned softly, rubbing a hand over his face. "Not exactly what I signed up for." But when he looked out at the growing mountain of mail, his chest tightened in a different way, not with dread, but with something warmer. Hope. Mid-afternoon, Liam took Ranger out into the back pasture. The dog moved more confidently now. Head up, tail lifted just slightly. Liam walked beside him, one hand resting lightly on the leash, not tight, not controlling, Just there, the wind cut across the field, bringing the smell of pine and frozen earth. For the first time, Ranger didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his head, brushed against Liam's leg, and kept walking. That evening, Sophie spread a map across Liam's kitchen table, tracing routes with her finger. "If they come back, they'll want to isolate you," she said, eyes sharp. "But you're not isolated anymore." Jack marked points on the map, murmuring strategies under his breath. Emily sat nearby, sifting through Ranger's photos, eyes misty but steady. Outside the window, Liam watched Ranger circling the porch, nose in the wind. The dog paused, lifted his head, ears pricked toward the tree line. Liam felt the prickle at the back of his neck. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time they were ready to face it, together. The Montana sky was heavy with low gray clouds as Liam Carter tightened the latch on the pasture gate. His breath clouded in the cold morning air, the faint smell of frost clinging to the ground. Ranger stood a few feet away, amber eyes fixed on the horizon, ears flicking toward every distant noise. It had been a week since the town gathered on the porch. Since then, Liam had kept busy. Repairs, drills with Jack, strategy meetings around Sophie's kitchen table. But beneath all the activity, he felt it. The waiting. Something was coming, and that morning it arrived. It began with the sound of engines on the long dirt road. Not the friendly rumble of Jack's old pickup or Sophie's little truck. This was heavier, smoother. Liam rose from where he knelt, wiping mud from his hands, heart already beating faster. A black SUV. Then, another. Two dark shapes, crawling up the drive like beetles. Ranger tensed at Liam's side, lips peeling back in a low growl that vibrated through the frozen ground. Liam placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. "Easy, boy." But inside, he wasn't easy at all. By the time the SUVs came to a halt, Jack and Sophie had emerged from the house. Emily Harper stood just inside the screen door, phone clutched in her hand, ready to call the sheriff. 4 men stepped out, sharp suits, military haircuts, cold eyes that swept the yard like searchlights. One of them approached, his smile thin, his words smoother than oil. "Mr. Carter, we're here to collect government property." Liam's jaw clenched. "He's not property." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I suggest you think very carefully about obstructing military business." Jack stepped forward, voice gravelly. "You're not on military business. You're on personal cleanup." A flicker of annoyance passed over the man's face. Sophie raised her phone, camera already rolling. "Smile for the press." The man's expression iced over. Ranger let out a low, rumbling bark that cut through the cold air like a blade. The men flinched, their eyes snapping to the scarred German shepherd now standing in front of Liam, body taut, head high. "You see this dog?" Liam said softly. "He's a combat veteran. He saved lives. He bled for this country, and he's not going anywhere." The air thickened, the tension sharp as wire. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the man exhaled, gave a tight mechanical smile, and signaled his team to back off. "We'll be in touch," he said smoothly. The SUVs rolled away, tires crunching over the frozen gravel. Inside, the ranch house was quiet. Emily sat at the table, her hands shaking as she poured coffee. Jack paced near the window, grumbling under his breath. Sophie rested her forehead against her hand, letting out a slow, tight breath. Liam stood in the doorway, staring out over the fields, where Ranger now ran, tearing great arcs through the snow-dusted grass, the cold air turning his breath to smoke. "He chose you," Sophie said softly behind him. Liam's voice was quiet. "Yeah." That night, the town showed up again. Trucks lined the drive, lanterns flickered in the yard, people brought sandwiches, coffee, firewood. A group of veterans set up a fire pit near the barn, laughing, cursing, telling stories that drifted into the cold night air. Ranger moved among them, stiff-legged at first, cautious, watchful, but as the night wore on, he eased, accepting a hand on his shoulder, a scratch behind the ear, a quiet word of thanks. Liam sat on the porch steps, watching the dog weave through the crowd, his chest tight with something he hadn't felt in years. Pride, not in himself, in Ranger. As the last of the crowd trickled away, Jack clapped Liam on the shoulder. "You've got a hell of a fight coming," he murmured. Liam nodded. "I know." Jack smiled faintly. "Good thing you're not alone." Later, as the moon rose over the dark fields, Liam walked the perimeter with Ranger at his side. They paused at the edge of the property, Liam resting a hand on the old fence post, Ranger pressing against his leg, the dog's breath warm in the cold. Liam looked down at him. "I don't care what they say," he murmured. "You're home." Ranger leaned in, just slightly, the scarred weight of him solid, grounding. The fight wasn't over, but Liam knew, deep in his bones, that they were ready. By dawn, Liam Carter was already in the barn, pushing bales of hay into place. His breath came in frosted puffs, hands stiff with cold. Ranger watched from the barn doorway, amber eyes following every movement, body still but taut, like a soldier awaiting orders. Outside, Jack Morales's truck rumbled up the drive. Sophie's little SUV pulled in behind, and Emily Harper stepped carefully from the passenger side, cradling a cardboard box. The cavalry had arrived. They gathered around the old wooden table in Liam's kitchen, a war room of coffee mugs, maps, and laptops. Sophie set up her computer, pulling up news articles, military reports, and shaky footage from cell phones. "This is how we win," she said firmly, glancing around. "Exposure. We leak the story before they can spin it." Emily laid out photos of Ranger in uniform, pressed close to Corporal Monroe in Afghanistan. Jack spread maps and marked spots where Hale's people might approach. Liam watched all of it quietly, his steel blue eyes flicking now and then to Ranger curled beneath the window, head on his paws, ears twitching at every sound. Out in the yard they ran drills. Jack set up barriers made of hay bales and old boards, walking Liam and Ranger through defensive routes. Sophie coordinated phone trees with local ranchers and veterans. Emily worked on her laptop, sending files to news outlets and advocacy groups for military animals. Ranger moved with purpose. Now, not the frantic, broken creature Liam had first brought home, but a dog rediscovering the shape of his strength. He responded to Liam's hand signals, his low voice, his steady presence. As they worked, more trucks arrived. Neighbors brought tools, veterans brought gear. Even the sheriff's deputy stopped by, his hat in hand, offering quiet words of support. The Carter Ranch was no longer just a quiet piece of land on the edge of town. It had become a line in the sand. That evening, Liam found a moment of quiet. He stood at the edge of the pasture, the sky painted in streaks of violet and gold, the air sharp with the bite of oncoming snow. Ranger sat at his feet, leaning lightly against his leg. Liam reached down, fingers curling into the thick ruff of fur at the dog's neck. "You're not just a soldier," he murmured. "You're my brother now." Ranger huffed softly, his eyes half closing under the touch. For a moment, the ache in Liam's chest loosened, and he realized he was no longer just fighting for Ranger. He was fighting for himself. That night, the town gathered again. They filled the yard, lanterns and string lights casting a warm glow over the frozen ground. Kids ran between the trucks, dogs barked, and old-timers leaned against the fence, swapping stories about wars long past. Sophie stood on the porch, holding up her phone as she read aloud messages from around the country, handlers, veterans, families, all offering support, money, prayers. Emily handed Liam a letter, a crumpled, tear-stained note from Ryan Monroe's parents. "Liam, we are with you. Bring him home." Liam folded the note carefully and tucked it into his jacket. Jack approached, clapping a hand on Liam's shoulder. "They'll come at night," Jack murmured. "Cowards like that always do." Liam nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Ranger stood at his side, head lifted, ears pricked forward, his body once gaunt and trembling, now hummed with quiet power. The scarred soldier had come home, in the deep hours of the night, after the crowd had drifted away and the fire pit had died to embers. Liam sat on the porch steps, head bowed, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Ranger climbed the steps, slowly, carefully, and settled beside him, his weight solid and real against Liam's shoulder. Neither of them spoke, of course. But in that silence, something passed between them. A promise. We stand together. As Liam drifted towards sleep, Sophie's voice echoed in his mind. They're not just coming for him. And Emily's quiet words, "He's all I have left." And Jack's grim warning, "Be ready." Liam opened his eyes and looked at the dog, resting beside him. "I'm ready," he whispered. Ranger stirred, pressed closer, and settled in again. The storm hit just after midnight. Not the kind that rolled in with thunder or rain, but the human kind. Liam Carter was asleep in the battered armchair near the window when Ranger's growl snapped him awake. The dog was on his feet, ears pricked, body taut, like a drawn wire. Outside, the faint beam of headlights swept across the far edge of the property. "They're here," Liam murmured, already reaching for his boots. Within minutes, Jack Morales was at the porch, shotgun slung over his shoulder. Sophie arrived, hair pulled into a tight braid, flashlight in hand. Emily Harper stood beside the phone, fingers trembling over the keypad. "They think they can scare you into handing him over," Jack said, voice low. "We'll show them different." Outside, Ranger paced along the fence line, his black and tan body cutting through the shadows. The scar on his flank caught the moonlight, a ghost of old battles, a mark of survival. The SUVs rolled in, tires crunching on frost-hardened ground. Men in dark coats stepped out, cold eyes, clipped movements, military efficiency. But this time they weren't facing just Liam and a dog. This time the entire town was waiting. Headlights snapped on along the ridge, the sheriff's trucks, the neighbors' pickups, the battered old jeeps of local veterans. One by one, engines roared to life, casting long, defiant beams across the field. Sophie lifted her phone, live stream already rolling. Emily stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We've alerted the press." The lead agent's mouth tightened. "You're obstructing federal recovery." Jack let out a dry laugh. "No, son, we're obstructing cowardice." Suddenly, a shape bolted across the field, a flash of fur and panic. A young dog, loose from one of the neighbors' farms, tore into the chaos, barking wildly, running straight toward the SUVs. A voice yelled. A man lunged. And then Ranger moved, like a shot from a bow. The scarred German shepherd was across the yard, intercepting the panicked animal in a heartbeat. He circled, herded, calmed, body low, movements smooth, eyes sharp with purpose. Liam watched, heart in his throat, as Ranger guided the trembling pup to safety, then turned, chest heaving, facing the men in black. In that moment, it was impossible not to see. Not a broken dog, not a dangerous reject, but a soldier, a hero. The men hesitated. One reached for a radio. Liam stepped forward, his voice clear, ringing across the frozen yard. "You want to explain to the cameras why you're here, why you're taking a decorated combat dog from the people who saved him." The agent's mouth pressed into a hard line. "You want to drag him off this land in front of veterans' families and a national audience?" Silence stretched. Then, slowly, the agent turned, signaling his men. Without a word, they withdrew, engines flaring to life, tires spitting gravel, as the SUVs disappeared down the road. As the noise faded, the yard erupted. Cheers, laughter, clapping, tears. Liam felt his knees go weak for a second, a surge of adrenaline crashing down like a wave. Sophie threw her arms around him. Emily squeezed his arm. Jack let out a whooping laugh. But Liam's eyes searched for one thing. Ranger. The dog was standing near the porch, head high, chest heaving, eyes locked on Liam. And then something rare, something beautiful. The tail lifted. A slow, tentative wag. By sunrise, news vans lined the county road. Reporters swarmed the yard, cameras capturing every angle. The scarred dog, the battle-worn Marine, the neighbors who refused to back down. Liam hated the noise, the flashing lights, the endless questions. But when a little girl approached, thin arms clutching a crayon drawing of Ranger, eyes wide with awe, and shyly held it out, Liam knelt beside her, his throat tight. Ranger, to everyone's astonishment, stepped forward, lowered his great scarred head, and pressed it gently against the child's shoulder. The cameras clicked, the world watched, and the story spread. That night, as the town settled into quiet, Liam sat on the porch steps. Ranger stretched at his feet. "Guess you made your point," Liam murmured, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Ranger huffed softly, rolling onto his side, the tension finally draining from his body. The fight wasn't over, but they had won this battle together. The night after the news broke, the Carter ranch was quiet, too quiet. Liam Carter sat on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, eyes scanning the horizon. Ranger lay at his feet, head resting on Liam's boot, eyes half closed but ears flicking at every distant sound. Inside, Sophie Bennett and Emily Harper made sandwiches for the volunteers who were still camped around the property. Jack Morales sat at the kitchen table, cleaning his old hunting rifle. The world outside the ranch was roaring. News headlines, social media, politicians weighing in. But here, on this old stretch of Montana earth, it was just a man, a dog, and the long, cold dark. Shortly after midnight, the smell of smoke hit Liam like a punch. He was on his feet before the first shout rang out. "Fire!" From the far edge of the property, beyond the pasture, orange flickers bloomed against the dark sky. Liam's heart slammed into his throat as he sprinted toward the barn. It wasn't just any fire. It was arson. The old wooden barn, the one Liam's grandfather had built with his own hands, was ablaze, flames licking up the dry beams, hay bales already a mass of embers. And inside, the sound that froze Liam's blood, whimpering. Trapped in the corner, behind a fallen beam, were two sedated rescue dogs Sophie had been treating, small, trembling shapes caught in a nightmare of heat and smoke. "No!" Liam barked, lunging forward, but the wall of fire drove him back. For a split second, Liam felt helpless, utterly, brutally helpless. And then, without warning, Ranger shot past him. The scarred German shepherd plunged into the burning barn like a streak of black lightning. Liam shouted, stumbling after him, the heat blistering his skin, the smoke tearing at his throat. Inside, through the haze, Liam caught glimpses. Ranger nosing at the beam, teeth sinking into cloth, dragging the limp form of a pup across the ash-covered floor. A second time back through the smoke, emerging with the second dog dangling from his jaws. Liam met him at the edge, coughing, grabbing the pups, stumbling clear as the roof sagged and collapsed behind them. For a long moment, there was only sound, the crackle of fire, the rasp of Liam's breath, the gasping coughs of the small dogs huddled at his feet. And then he saw Ranger. The big dog staggered from the barn, sides heaving, fur scorched, a cut above his eye weeping blood. He made it 3 steps into the cold grass, then crumpled to the ground. "No," Liam choked, dropping to his knees, hands buried in that smoke-reeking fur. "Stay with me, soldier," he whispered, voice breaking. Sophie was already running, Emily on her heels. Jack calling into the radio for emergency help. Liam bent low, pressing his forehead to Ranger's. "Don't you dare give up on me," he murmured. "Not after all we've fought through." The hours blurred into an ache of waiting. They rushed Ranger to Sophie's clinic, where hands worked fast, saline, stitches, oxygen, bandages. Liam paced outside in the cold, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles bled. Emily brought coffee. He couldn't drink. Jack offered words he couldn't hear. He kept seeing it over and over, the moment Ranger fell, the second his body hit the frozen earth. Just before dawn, Sophie stepped out, her eyes red-rimmed but steady. "He's alive," she said softly. He's a fighter. Liam sank onto the bench, burying his face in his hands. When Sophie let him inside, Liam sat on the floor beside the recovery crate, resting his hand on the thick bandages wrapped around Ranger's chest. "You stupid, beautiful dog," he whispered, a tear slipping down his cheek. "You saved them." Ranger shifted, one eye cracking open. The faintest thump of his tail brushed against Liam's leg. That evening, as word spread of Ranger's sacrifice, the response was overwhelming. The sheriff arrived to arrest 2 men caught fleeing the fire, contractors tied to Hale's old crew. News outlets flooded the town covering the dog that had defied orders and saved lives. Donations poured in, letters, offers of help. But none of it mattered to Liam as much as the slow, steady rise of Ranger's breathing in the quiet of the recovery room. Back at the ranch, Liam walked through the charred remains of the barn, the smell of wet ash sharp in the air. Jack clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder. "We'll rebuild," Jack said simply. Liam nodded, staring into the blackened timbers. "Yeah," he murmured, "we will." That night, under a sky spangled with stars, Liam sat on the porch, watching the horizon, and in his arms, for the first time without fear, Ranger rested his great scarred head, eyes closed, body at peace. They had survived the fire. But the real fight, the reckoning, was still to come. The first time Liam Carter saw Ranger walk again after the fire, it almost broke him. It was just a few steps, stiff, careful, wobbly on his bandaged legs. But the moment Ranger crossed the small clinic recovery room under his own power, Liam dropped to his knees, hands shaking, eyes blurring with tears. "Attaboy," Liam whispered, voice rough. "Attaboy, Ranger." Sophie Bennett stood nearby, watching with misty eyes, one hand pressed to her chest. Emily Harper had come every day, bringing letters from veterans, children, and strangers across the country. Jack Morales helped organize donations to rebuild the barn and improve the ranch. The Carter place, once a forgotten stretch of Montana land, was now a symbol. But the most important knock came one cold morning when 2 sharply dressed military officers arrived at Liam's door. Liam met them on the porch, Ranger at his side, still wrapped in his bandages but standing proud. The taller officer removed his cap, his expression solemn. "Mr. Carter, we owe you and Ranger an apology. We failed, both of you." He handed over a thick folder, stamped, sealed, and signed. Inside were orders. Colonel Victor Hale was under investigation. His operations were being shut down, and a national review had been launched to overhaul the treatment and retirement of military service dogs. The news cameras were back, crowding the ranch as the press conference unfolded. Liam hated every second of it, but when the reporter crouched to ask Ranger if he was ready for his close-up, and the old shepherd lifted his head and gave the faintest solemn tail wag, Liam couldn't help but smile. That afternoon, a quiet moment came. Liam sat with Ranger in the pasture, the scorched earth near the barn slowly greening under winter sun. Sophie, Emily, and Jack joined him, sitting on the rough wooden fence. "They're calling him a hero," Sophie murmured. "He is," Emily said softly. Jack let out a dry laugh. "Hell, so are you, Liam." Liam shook his head, his steel blue eyes fixed on the horizon. "I'm just the lucky one who got to walk beside him." Ranger turned his scarred head, pressing lightly against Liam's leg. For the first time in years, Liam felt something crack open inside him. Not pain, not fear, not guilt. Something lighter. Something that felt like peace. The real change came when the Senate called. Liam and Ranger were flown to Washington, where, under the blinding lights of a packed hearing room, they gave testimony about what had happened. Liam spoke quietly, his voice steady as he laid out the truth, not just about Ranger, but about all the dogs like him, about the way they were used, discarded, and left behind, about the debt owed to them. When Liam finished, Ranger, now fully recovered, stood beside him, broad and still, wearing his old combat harness. And in that moment, The entire room rose to its feet. For a dog, for a soldier, for a bond that had survived fire, war, and betrayal. Weeks later, back home, the Freedom Paws Center was born. Liam turned part of his land into a sanctuary for retired military dogs, a place for healing for dogs and veterans alike. Sophie became the resident veterinarian. Emily ran outreach. Jack handled logistics. And at the center of it all was Ranger, no longer a shadow of war, but a symbol of redemption. One spring morning, Liam sat on the porch steps, Ranger at his side, the sun spilling gold over the new kennels and training fields. He watched as a young veteran, missing a leg, but laughing freely, worked with a nervous shepherd under Jack's eye. Sophie knelt beside a trembling puppy, her gentle hands steadying its tiny body. Emily handed out coffee and paperwork with her calm, sure smile. Liam reached down, brushing his hand over Ranger's thick fur. "Look what you built, old man," he murmured. Ranger leaned into the touch, his great body warm and solid against Liam's leg. The letters still came, sometimes from far-off places, sometimes from neighbors down the road. Thank you for giving him a second chance, for standing up when no one else would, for showing us what loyalty really means. That night, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Liam sat on the porch, watching the last light fade. Ranger lay beside him, chin resting on Liam's boot. Eyes half closed, Liam exhaled, slow and steady. "We're home," he whispered. For the first time in a long, long time, it felt true. Summer arrived quietly in Montana, slipping over the hills like a soft blanket. The fields at the Freedom Paws Center rippled with tall grass, the kennels hummed with life, and laughter drifted through the air as veterans worked with their dogs, building trust, learning patience, healing wounds seen and unseen. On the porch of the old Carter ranch house, Liam Carter sat in a worn chair, a cup of coffee in his hand, his steel blue eyes turned toward the sunrise. Ranger lay stretched across the steps, his great black and tan body dappled with sunlight, his breath slow and steady. The scars were still there, the faint white line on his flank, the healed gash above his eye, but they no longer defined him. A soft laugh pulled Liam from his thoughts. Sophie Bennett crossed the yard, auburn ponytail swaying, clipboard tucked under her arm. "You're up early," she teased. Liam gave a slow grin. "Comes with the uniform." She settled on the top step beside him, her grey fleece jacket streaked with puppy paw prints. "He's doing well," she murmured, reaching down to scratch behind Ranger's ear. "Better than well, actually." Liam's voice was quiet, touched with pride.
"He saved me as much as I saved him."
Emily Harper appeared next, arms full of paperwork and mail. "We got another letter from the Monroe family," she said softly, passing it to Liam. He unfolded the note carefully, his rough fingers trembling just slightly. "Thank you for carrying Ryan's memory, for giving Ranger a home, for proving that loyalty can outlast anything." Liam folded the paper, slipping it into the pocket over his heart. The day unfolded like a painting. Blue skies stretched wide, laughter spilling across the yard. The bark of dogs carried on the wind. Veterans trained with their canine partners, learning the delicate dance of trust and command. Children from the community wandered through the fields, bringing treats and gentle hands. Jack Morales stood near the barn, hammer in hand, directing a group of volunteers as they raised a new sign over the main gate. Freedom Paws Center, where heroes find home. As the sun dipped low, casting gold over the hills, Liam gathered everyone near the porch. Ranger sat beside him, upright and proud, his thick coat catching the light. Liam's voice was quiet, steady. "We built this place because of him, because he reminded us what it means to fight, and to heal, and to stand for those who can't stand alone." He rested a hand on Ranger's broad head. "And because of all of you," the crowd murmured, a soft ripple of emotion. Jack clapped Liam on the back. Sophie blinked fast against the sudden shine in her eyes. Emily slipped a quiet arm around Liam's shoulders. That night, as the stars rose sharp and clear, Liam sat on the porch alone. Or almost alone. Ranger was there, as he always had been. His body stretched out in the cool night air, his breathing even, his eyes half closed but watchful. Liam leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly beneath him. "We made it, old man," he murmured. Ranger huffed, his sound low and content. Liam smiled faintly. "You're more than just a soldier. You're family." The wind stirred through the tall grass, carrying with it the faint sounds of laughter, of dogs barking, of a world Liam once thought he had lost. As the moon climbed higher, Liam reached into his jacket and pulled out the small medal the military had sent. Ranger's official commendation for bravery. He turned it over in his palm, feeling its weight, then leaned forward, fastening it to Ranger's harness. "You earned this," he whispered. Ranger shifted slightly, nudging his great head against Liam's knee. For a long moment, they sat there. A man and his dog, survivors both. The past folded behind them like a closed chapter. And ahead of them, nothing but open fields, clear skies, and the quiet, steady work of healing. In the months that followed, the Freedom Pause Center became a national symbol. Veterans arrived from across the country, each with their own wounds. Dogs retired from combat found new purpose, new homes. Sophie expanded the veterinary clinic. Emily ran fundraising drives. Jack launched a mentorship program. And at the heart of it all was Ranger, the scarred German shepherd who had been thrown away, written off, left behind. The dog who refused to quit. The dog who saved a life, and in doing so saved dozens more. On the anniversary of the fire, the town gathered at the ranch. They planted a tree near the old barn, its roots sinking deep into the blackened earth, its branches reaching for the sky. As they worked, Liam stood with Ranger at his side, his hand resting lightly on the dog's back. He looked out over the fields, the people, the place they had built together, and he knew, with bone-deep certainty, that they had created something that would last. Not just a sanctuary, not just a center, but a legacy.